Everyone, please take your seats. We're going to get started. If everyone can please take their seats, we're going to get started.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. It's about 6:03 p.m. on Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. I'd also like to welcome everyone that's here in our City Council chambers, as well as our listening audience at WCBU. I'd also like to welcome the audience watching on cable channel 22. Madam Clerk, the council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Mayor Ali,
Present.
Councilmember Allen, Councilmember Sear, Councilmember Gordon Young, Councilmember Graham, Councilmember Jackson,
Here.
Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Euler, Councilmember Riggenbach,
Here.
Councilmember Velpula,
Present.
and Councilmember Vespa.
Here.
You have a quorum present, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Everyone, please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk?
We are at the minutes.
Councilmember Riggenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve the minutes of the joint City Council and Town Board meeting held on July 11th, 2023 as printed.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Any comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at the consent agenda. 23-264 is a communication with a request to approve and authorize the execution of a contract with Resource Management Associates in the amount of $100,825 to administer the police sergeant and police lieutenant promotional examinations. 23-265 is a communication with a request to approve a first addendum to the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Peoria and the Dunlap Community Unified School District regarding the Medina Plains Allen Road Business Park Tax Increment Financing District. 23-253 is a communication from the City Manager and Corporation Council with a request to adopt an ordinance amending the rules of the City Council. 23-254 is a communication with request to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 3 of the Municipal Code of the City of Peoria to add language to withdraw a site approval application for liquor establishments before City Council consideration. 23-255 is a communication with a request to adopt an ordinance amending the Unified Development Code of the City of Peoria to add language to withdraw an application for a zoning change before City Council consideration. 23-266 is a communication with a request to approve the site application for a Class A tavern liquor license with a Subclass 1 4 a.m. closing hours with on-site consumption and retail sale of alcohol for the new Peoria Puff, Inc., doing business as the Neon Bison at 617 Main Street, contingent upon the issuance of all appropriate permits and certificate of occupancy with a recommendation from the Liquor Commission to approve. 23-267 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the CDBG Public Service Advisory Commission with a request to concur of Jalissa Brown. 23-268 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Downtown Advisory Commission with a request to concur of Kate Kinney. 23-269 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Sister City Commission with a request to concur of Karen Smith. 23-270 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Planning and Zoning Commission with a request to concur of Teresa Kaler. 23-271 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Advisory Committee on Police Community Relations with a request to concur of Omar Malcolm. 23-272 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Springdale Cemetery Management Authority with a request to concur of Therese Brink. 23-273 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Public Arts Advisory Commission with a request to concur of DeMarcus Hamilton. 23-274 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Fair Employment Commission with a request to concur of Anupama Udavalu. 23-275 is an appointment by Mayor Ali to the Peoria Public Library Board of Trustees with a request to concur of Stephen Marks. And that concludes our consent agenda.
Are there any items to remove from consent? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda moved by Councilmember Allen, seconded by Councilmember Gordon Young? Any comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We have one presentation tonight, and that's 23-276, a communication from the City Manager and Director of Public Works with a request to receive and file a presentation by Terra Engineering regarding the Riverfront Plan.
Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This evening we have with us George Garib and Kevin Graham from Terra Engineering, who are going to walk through the proposed Riverfront redevelopment plan. This has been many years in the making that they'll be talking about. After that, after the presentation, we'll have some time for question and answer, and the questions can be directed at the Terra team or Director Powers or myself. So we're looking forward to the presentation this evening, and I'm going to turn it right over to our team to let them walk through everything with you. So.
Welcome. I've been waiting.
Moment we've all been waiting for, huh?
Yes.
Let's get this going. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for taking the time to allow us to present to you our vision for the Peoria Riverfront. This has been in the making since 2017, and so relax, but be attentive, and we're going to go on a walk, all of us here at the riverfront. We're going to show you what have we done in the past 5 years, and we'll take some questions at the end. I want to start the presentation by giving you a little bit of a brief background. The project limits as it currently stands is from bridge to bridge. Some people might say, why is it bridge to bridge? Primarily because that's where the existing riverfront location, park location. So how did we start, and where did we come up with at this stage? In 2017, we all remember the Water Street Riverfront Village. The structure was in a little bit of a structurally bad shape. The city made the decision to demolish the building. At that stage, we had a couple of public involvement meetings. Through that, we developed what technically you see on the presentation slide there, a small location of where possibly we isolated that parcel by itself developed a small park. However, that was back in 2018. However, the city staff, which I really commend for their vision, said, why don't we take that a little bit more and stretch out the limits of the park, going a little bit from one side of the bridge to another. Primarily because some of the public involvement comments that we received requested, why don't we have a fountain? Why don't we have a climbing wall? Some of the other amenities that you can have in a park. So the city staff made the decision to go ahead and expand the location of the riverfront park. Throughout this process from 2017 till now, we roughly had about, I would say, 20 to plus public involvement meetings. Started out by developing a citizens advisory group, which we met at the museum, met at Gateway Building several times. The actual members of the citizens advisory groups were the people who actually developed the vision that you see now at the riverfront. We've had many meetings. We've met with council members. We've met with, throughout this whole process up till today. Actually today, the last few hours of today, we met with some members of the riverfront market, and we made some adjustments to what you will see today, actually, so we can accommodate the riverfront market and the future of the riverfront market. I'm going to introduce Kevin, who's our chief landscape architect, and he's going to walk us through some of the details, and I'll come back and walk you through some of the parking requirements and so forth.
As George said, my name is Kevin Graham. I'm the senior landscape architect and planner for Terra. Throughout the project and throughout this process, we have always held to the one tenet in this project that this needs to be a resilient park. But how do we define what a resilient park is? It's land, it's the water, it's the habitat, materials, social, economic, all these components. But it's also really hyper-focused on the flooding. We know the park floods, and what we need to design is a park that is resilient in how it bounces back, how efficient, how easy it is for the staff to bring this back online. So that is part of this plan as we go forward. So what we did through all those myriads of public involvement that George talked about, we held a lot of commonalities through the plan. Is how do we connect some of the civic spaces, the museum, the visitor centers, the civic center? How do we connect that into this park that we now just took down a riverfront village, and we can see the river, we can see the water? How do we incorporate play and family, art and reflection and cultural activities in the riverfront? Still housing our festivals and the entertainment opportunities. And then how do we embody that and bring back more active spaces? And that's kind of what led to this concept plan of move, play, interact, reflect, and festivals. More granular, looking at the plan, kind of starting down from the we'll call it the south end, Bob Michael Bridge end, the more active end of this, with features like active play, and I'll go into more detailed and zoomed in on all these, but more active play in that area. You'll see the center area is focused more on the great lawn and flexibility in that space, event space, embodying the farmer's market space. We know that's a great activity along the riverfront, and we only wanted to see it become better and more. To how do we reactivate the Gateway building and that space from its fountain, that space to activity and group gatherings, and then how do we work with the festival area. And a lot of these ideas came through interactions and meetings with key stakeholders, the park district, many business owners, as well as the general public, giving us input as to what would engage them into a riverfront park. Looking at a lot of precedents, what has worked in other locations, what hasn't, what has been that catalyst, and what are lessons learned that we can pull from that. So with that, that generates this plan, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this detailed part, but generally what you're going to see in this, I'm going to go into each area more specific, but from dog parks to kayak launches to the barge park, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the farmers market, event space, great lawn, and the interactive areas and festivals. So to drill down into that a little bit more, I'm going to kind of start in the center area of the park, which is kind of that great lawn. That is kind of where we're starting the center. I'm going to work out both ways. Key to this area, I think, is the word flexibility. And what we've done in this area is expanded the parking, and I wish I had a pointer, but the parking that is currently there up along Water Street between Main Street and the entrance to where the river station would be. We've extended a bay of parking there, but then we've extended an additional paved area, plaza, pedestrian space that is flexible. And I'll show some more details of this, but the idea is to have that harking back to the history of railroads in downtown Peoria and along the river, the working river. So we're utilizing, what we're calling for in that plaza is utilizing rails and picnic tables and planters that are on rails that can be moved out of the way and opened up for larger events, the farmers market, other events, seasonal events, a winter festival, all types of different opportunities. That opens up then onto the more, we're calling it the Great Lawn or more open lawn, that view. We've opened this riverfront up from the riverfront village. We don't want to close it off. And then one of the things we heard all the way through is getting people connected back to the water, to the river, and not turning our back on the Illinois River anymore. So this central area now, essentially from the current marina docks to the area that was the former Spirit and hopefully the new boat that will be there someday, space, stepping that down. I'll show you details of that. The entrance off of Main Street is key and becomes a key central drop-off area, wayfinding area as a terminus to Main Street. And as Main Street is looked at in a renovation going forward, this is that key step in that, starting of that, and a nice memorial piece of that. Looking at some of the key details of this, when I said we are kind of looking at kind of how that steps down to the water and bringing it a little closer to what normal water level is. Again, designed to flood, but having this accessible route, having different stepping configurations. These are very popular for people to lounge on, to sit, have lunch, have that interconnection, connection back to the river. Obviously with a safety rail and of that also. When I talked about the expanded area of the event space, the parking lot, in this view it is showing with cars parked in that upper parking zone And then the other area below that as being pedestrian plaza space. This shows it with the planters, the benches in their normal position. And then they're on rails. They can be easily moved out of the way. And then market, festival, a seasonal event in the winter would be a great feature space for this. This kind of shows, just kind of in a quick click, how all that operates. Things just they will be able to be slid out of the way to open that up. And the key is, this plaza is that space is be curbless, so easily transferable across the two surfaces. Another feature of this Central Great Lawn is bringing back the swing, and permanent swings that are lit, they're safe, gives that front porch, that front lawn aspect to the river. I talked about the terminus of Main Street and bringing back, how do we reinvigorate that? It still needs to function as a drop-off space for the park, for events, future boat. What we have identified is the 5 memorials that are along the river down on the the north side we'll call it, of the Murray Baker Bridge, bringing those up to a more prominent focal point and a new, more decorative small fountain feature in this drop-off zone. Just another view of that. Then as we transition over to near the Gateway building, this area we have focused on art and sound in the area around the riverside of the Gateway building. One of the key features is working with local artists in this, and it's an art park, and then an interactive fountain in front of the Gateway building that it can either be an interactive art added to with lighting and at night, as well as it can be turned off and be expanded space for setting up events. What does that look like? Again, we envision, and we're not suggesting this is the art that goes in this park. We would like to work with local artists to curate what those pieces are. This should have the culture, the history of Peoria embedded into it. And it should have local artists doing those pieces. Everyone likes the Instagram photo, and having a piece of art that is commemorated to be in Peoria. We're not saying it's necessarily the word Peoria, could be, but having that as that key focal point, I think, is pretty dramatic. And then having the interactive jets that can come up, be lit at night as part of the feature of the terminus of this park. When we talked to the festival grounds, there were a couple of key elements that came out as we talked with the Park District and other entertainment management people, is we need better infrastructure there. So what we've identified in the master plan or the development plan is really expanding the infrastructure, electric, water, in that area. How do we build this back so that after these large events, the turf can be reinvigorated quicker? So how the planting specifications for that. And again, that's the resiliency of a park. It's not just when it floods, it's when we activate and when we use it. And how do we get that back online as quick as possible? There are two options for the entertainment aspects here. The Park District has already kind of brought in an area where they can set up the stages, the temporary portable, the concert stages. But then we see another area down along the river for a band shell that becomes an artistic piece in its own, but serves those evenings. So if you're out there on a Tuesday evening, well, you won't be on a Tuesday evening because you'll be here at this meeting, but on an evening meeting where it's a family event, smaller entertainment events on the lawn. And then another view, kind of what that could look like going back towards the Murray Baker Bridge. Looking further, again, down towards the Bob Michael Bridge, we identified this as that active young adult, more active end, and with features that kind of build off of, we heard a lot of the folks from the warehouse district and different groups. But how do we activate that in with the park is, you know, with different features like outdoor fitness stations, outdoor fitness park, not just different stations broken around, flexible courts, sand volleyball, those type of uses, not overbuilt with courts, but pulling back some of that parking and then opening that up, and then opening up some of that lawn for a dog park and kayak launch. But I think one of the key features here on this end is we always struggled with the park could get to kind of these buildings and these three buildings. You have Amaron, and then you have the two other private buildings. And how do we get around that? And one of the ideas that came to, kept growing was after the representative had his event out on there on the barge, is potentially looking at stacking two barges and creating a barge park. This has been done in other cities and very successfully. And essentially you're floating a barge, so it moves with the water, but you're treating it like a green roof and planting. So this allows us to get that connection and really make a full connection of the entire riverfront from end to end and not be bifurcated or stopped short. And what, playground features and what that barge might look like going across and walking across it as a pathway, sitting area, lighting, shade on that connection. The outdoor fitness, a bigger trend that we're finding far more successful than, putting an exercise feature along a path every so often, is having these fitness areas. Groups will go out there and work out together. They're guided. With this, we actually talked to a group that has a grant available to be a participant in this type of idea. And then what it might look like from opening up what was a very industrial corridor and hardened area to Peoria's new front door, its new entrance into the city. With that, I'm going to let George jump back in to talk about a couple infrastructure items.
Thanks, Kevin. Part of what was the challenge is to come up with some money for the flood protection. Everybody talks about flood protection along the riverfront, mainly along the river station building and along where the existing wave attenuator that was used to protect the existing Spirit of Peoria. We worked really diligently with IEMA and FEMA the last year, and we were very successful to get a grant for almost $300,000 to start the design process. The actual construction of both of those, the removable flood wall, and I'll show you how some of the details of it, and the wave attenuator. The actual cost of construction will be around $3 million. But the design portion of the money that we were able to get will get our foot in the door, so we can apply eventually for a BRIC grant that covers the construction. The engineer part of me always likes to show some drawings, so this is what will look like the wave attenuator. It will sit on piles, but it will act not only as a wave attenuator to protect the future boat, but also will act as a observation deck, so people can actually come a little bit more closer to the wall. The flood protection, this is what's been done in Davenport. We're using something of similar nature. This is a portable. Normally we know when the flood comes in, so we can erect the posts and put the plank walls in between, and off we go. And whenever the flood recedes, then we can come back and do that again. There's been a lot of discussion about parking in downtown Peoria. A lot of discussion, and I'm sure a lot of you have been feeling calls about parking in downtown Peoria. We actually took the center portion of the Riverfront Park and made an inventory of all the parking around the riverfront area. Within 5 minutes walking distance from the center of the Riverfront Park, we have over 3,000 parking spots downtown, over 3,000. So let's take that and focus a little bit more on where the where the riverfront is, from Water Street down to the riverfront. And we broke it down by zones. We actually took zones there, and a total of existing parking spots of 549. The new proposed is 559. So we actually gained 10 more parking spots on the riverfront. So now, take it for granted that some of these parkings have been reassigned to complement the new uses of the park. So it's not going to be exactly where it was, but we didn't lose a lot of parking, and we extended the parking both to the north and the south, especially to the north where the Michaels Bridge is, with the foreseeable future that hopefully we can get in the Gateway building a rail station. We've expanded the parking there to take that into consideration as well. To accommodate the Riverfront Park, the Riverfront Market, downtown Peoria, which is a great venue, 5,000 people or so come every Saturday. Not only we went there and watched the Riverfront Market operation on several Sundays, we actually put cameras, and where you see those red-green dots, those are locations of cameras that we actually videotaped the location for 7 days. And we made an inventory of all the vehicles coming in and coming out of the parking at all these locations and at all the parking locations there. And at no one point in time, the highest peak of parking was at 2 a.m. in front of Kelleher's. We all know where that is, which doesn't even come close to the proposed future parking we have. So we are actually exceeding the parking spots that we have capacity for. Now, all of this park is great and wonderful. It's going to require safety and security. That's where our police comes into play. In addition, from our perspective, we are going to use permanent lighting. We're going to use cameras and security cameras. There's been a lot of studies that's been done that, people question, why do I want to go downtown now to the riverfront? There's nothing there, and it could be dangerous. Well, when you change the atmosphere and change the dynamics, there's been a lot of studies that complement this fact that changing that dynamics, changing the momentum will make the area even sort of self-policing and make it a little bit more safer. So to close this off, we were, from day one, took into resiliency into play. We gained about 18.5 acres of green space, 4 miles of walkways, roughly, don't quote us on this, roughly over 900 trees and green infrastructure all throughout. With that, I want to close, and before I close, I want to thank you all for listening to us and for giving us the opportunity to work on this project. This project will really transform downtown Peoria for generations and generations and generations to come. And I really thank you, Madam Mayor, Honorable Madam Mayor, esteemed council, for the opportunity to get us involved with this project. And we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Garib, and thank you, Mr. Graham. A lot of extensive work and time and effort has been put into this. It's very impressive, and I'm sure we'll have some questions. I just wanted, Mr. Manager, if you would just verify that all the land that's in this plan is owned by the city of Peoria?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, all the land is owned by the city. There are the three buildings, the Edgewater Building, the Amarin Building, and then the what used to be the Crooked Waters Building. I'm showing my age with that one in town. Those three buildings are privately owned. Everything else is all part of the city has acquired, so it's city-owned property. We, as you know, we can see that we have representatives from the Park District that are here in the audience this evening. We contract with the Park District to maintain and program the space along the riverfront. So they're our partner in this effort, and obviously, any additional maintenance responsibilities or programming responsibilities, we'll be partnering with them to do that.
Okay, great. And Mr. Garib, if you could speak to, the total cost of this proposed project, and knowing that we may not have all the money at one time, how do you phase it in based upon getting, say, an initial 20, 25,000 or 15,000? How do you phase this in? Where do we start?
Thank you. That's a great question. So part of the construction cost of this, we don't have an actual construction cost. So the cost average is right now between 15 to 25 million. So it's a big range. And part of the reason is we are at 30,000 foot high. When we come closer, we could tweak the design a little bit more, whether depending on how much money we have. The money is available from, the city got DCO money for 15 million. It's interesting to know that we started making rounds of presentations for, community stakeholders. And already we've been reached out by several members of the community to participate in this. So once you start implementation of this, I'm sure we will get a lot more people involved. So there's an opportunity for private-public development. We've been approached for people that want to help with the fountain on Main Street. We've been approached by people that want to help with the shell for the entertainment. We've been approached by people that wanted to help with the lighting and the big jets. So there's a lot of opportunities for this. Now, if we get all the money before we start, we'll probably build it all together. But of course, we are never at one point we're going to say, hey, we're going to close Water Street down, everything is shutting off, and then we're going to start building a park. We will phase that into construction depending on how much money we have.
Okay. And then in terms of the flood protection or the flood wall, you received the grant for $300,000 from FEMA, but it's not enough. It's a great start, right? But what will it take to build that flood wall?
So it's a great start. The flood money we got is only for the design, which we were good and lucky at some portions because that puts our foot in the door. So now FEMA is sort of on the hook. They gave us a little bit money to design it. The actual construction cost for the wave attenuator, which is up to the north side, is roughly around $700,000. The cost for the river around the flood wall around the river station is about $2.5 million. So we're hoping once we get the design on board, we can get. We are going to apply again for the brick money from FEMA. So hopefully that will help us get some more money in.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Euler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A couple questions. First of all, during the discussion about early on in the presentation about the design of the park, the mention was made about ensuring that there's a park that can easily recover when there is flooding. Can you tell us the difference between what will be accomplished with the flood wall and what won't be accomplished with the flood wall that we would need to have some quick recovery from? What does that picture look like?
I'll address the flood wall, and I'll have Kevin talk about the resiliency of the actual park. So the flood wall covers most of the area around the river station. So, back in the days, we all know the river station used to flood, and we put the sandbags. Right now, the wall that we are proposing, that we hopefully get money for, will protect all the area around the river station, so eliminate that flooding. We also have the breakwater, so that sort of protects the old spirit of Peoria, or the new riverboat that comes in from flooding as well. But as far as resiliency, I'm going to let Kevin talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so a lot of it's picking of the right materials and design of certain ways. When we design a fountain, for example, having the forethought ahead that we can cap jets a certain way and lock them in. So we know the flood water is going to come up, let it come up, but then we can power wash it and clean it off easier. Having electronic boards that are plug and play that we can remove so they're not underwater. So those are some of the more technical parts, but a lot of it too is thinking about, what we do with the plantings and how we maintain them, what types and how we group things like that so that we're not replacing mulch, as soon as it washes away. That the turf is drained right and is sloped right, that it will drain away in due time and be recoverable. Surfaces, again, that are designed to be able to be cleaned easier than, we know it's going to come up, we're not going to stop it, but how do we, not create additional work for us, for the public works, down the road. So a lot of this is really, thinking it out. There are some other big river cities that have taken this challenge, and so we've gone and visited them, talked to them, lessons learned from them. Don't do this instead. So we want to employ a lot of those lessons learned here in Peoria.
On the topic of the landscaping as a whole, I would say that we have not always done the most effective job maintaining the riverfront, and that's some of the criticism that we get. Do we have some kind of an ongoing maintenance concept of what that's going to cost? Because obviously there's going to be some additional expense when you talk about moving parts and more activities and things that are happening there. And I know that we're going to partner with the park district to accommodate that, but obviously there's going to be a cost somewhere, and I would expect that if we're going to get into something like this, we have some idea of what that looks like.
Sure.
And are planning for that as well.
Absolutely. And throughout this process, one of the things we've worked with Director Powers and his department with the city is developing an operations and maintenance budget through the whole project. So when we make a choice, do we put this type of paving or this type of paving, this kind of landscaping or this kind of landscaping, what is it going to take to maintain that on a normal basis and then in a recovery basis? So it's a very long spreadsheet, and a lot of these things are things that are done on a daily basis, an annual basis, routine, and it's expanding on that or augmenting that. What we see happening in a lot of examples, a lot of communities, is there are other partners. We've talked about the Park District. There's opportunities for creating a friends of or foundations that help augment some of that. But throughout this process and going forward into, detailed design, that operational budget needs to be on the table every review meeting and every step of the way to have that conversation.
Actually, I think Kevin nailed it. The bottom line is we come before you every budget year and ask for O&M dollars relative to the riverfront park in its present state. What we have conceptually now, meaning standard day-to-day O&M, would be approximately 100,000 more, which is we're about 250,000 now per annum working in partnership with parks. We would estimate that would increase about 100,000 current programming, what you see conceptually. Again, I know that's low when you think out year, because when you start replacing that type of maintenance, it will likely increase exponentially, obviously. But also to Kevin's point, This is going to be a more robust park that has the ability to create events that are going to offset some of what we need to perform maintenance in the park. So we'll be looking for all those things. But to answer your question directly, Counselor, I'll be here along with the city manager asking for budget for operations and maintenance for the park and everything that we install as we go forward. Anything that we install, we will bring the O&M budget with it. So that'll be a part of that planning and installation process.
And I guess as part of that and some of the other things we've talked about, obviously this is a 30,000-foot view, and there'll be a lot more details in the future. And even, with some of the conversations we had prior to the meeting, things are still changing. Just want to ensure that there will be at some point a final vote before we start to move forward with a plan that says this is the plan, this is the cost, this is the maintenance. The more specifics than the 30,000-foot view. I don't want to say, receive and file, we're good to go tonight, knowing that there's a lot of moving pieces in the coming months or years, and have that seen as a sign of final approval. I want to make sure that there is actually a final approval.
Yeah, what we anticipate is that this goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission next week. They'll take this up. I think it's August 3rd, and then this would come back to you for approval of the conceptual design on August 8th. Then as we start to move into that detailed design work, that's when we'll have more meetings and more discussion about how we hone that out, start to put, structure what would be final packages that would go out to bid, come back to you with the maintenance plans, and that would be the approvals that the council would make at that point in time of the final design.
That's absolutely. And actually, George just made a good point too, Mr. Manager, that we would have public involvement, your involvement on each step in this. And again, being 30,000 feet, I would put this akin to a long-range plan, that as we start to put some brick and mortar to really thought around this, we would come back to you, kind of to the mayor's point of the scope. And as we bring this in and how we stage it in, those would come back to you for individual votes and funding and so on. So that's how we see this evolving. Because again, to the point earlier that the mayor made, some of this is easy. We can put in sand volleyball courts pretty quickly. Those fitness areas, we can pop them in now because there's green space and they could easily go in place. We still would come back to you and say, do you approve this funding for this amount? This would be the funding source. And within the concept of, again, what I think we're considering somewhat of a long-range plan for the park.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions. Thank you, Councilman Euler. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to say thank you for the presentation this evening and the amount of work that you all put into this plan, the renderings, the different stakeholder groups and meetings that you've held over the last 5 years, and all those too who participated in this. A lot of time and effort has gone into this. I know we're at the 30,000-foot view right now, but I'm very excited that we are looking at our riverfront because we know that it is a crown jewel of Central Illinois, and it can be a place of destination, a preferred place of destination as well too. So thank you all so much. I know we are still a ways from making final decisions, but we're heading in the right direction. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Councilmember Regenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I want to echo what both of my colleagues have said so far. This is exciting. This is a new page for Peoria, and I think we're all anxious to help move this along forward. Just a little bit of follow-up to the flood-related questions that Councilman Euler had. Looking at the map, the floating breakwaters and the portion around the river station, we understand. So it's basically the Great Lawn area that will be suspect to flooding, is if I'm looking at that right, because that's basically the part now, I believe. It's south of the Gateway building, and to the river station. So it's that Great Lawn area that will be built more resilient, if I'm using the right terminology.
Yeah, the Great Lawn area, along with what we refer to now as the plaza, the new plaza where you saw, let me go back here 1 second. I think you might see.
What the tracks.
The tracks are. And most of the material right here. So most of this will be more resilient material that will accommodate flooding.
All right, thank you. And again, I think we're all thrilled, and when that old Riverfront Village came down, everybody was anxious to get something in place. Well, I'm just so glad that we've been deliberate about this and that we're not just putting a little square park in there, but this is going to be an entire front yard, as you said. So thanks for the efforts, and thanks for listening, and I'm sure there'll be more listening to be done moving forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman.
Just to clarify the point on resiliency, Councilor, I think you were asking about the resiliency, meaning full-blown flood protection, right? So yes, that Great Lawn and River Station would be more accustomed to what we're seeing now that we'd previously sandbagged, meaning fully protecting the building or as much as we can with the flood wall, and then pumps running, again, as much as we can hold back the river. That would be the protection. Resiliency is what Kevin was talking about, the remainder of the park. Resiliency will be built into the fountain, for instance, in that area where we can cap jets and protect it from the floodwaters, knowing it's going to flood over them. The type of plantings, the plant materials that are not susceptible to dying through being underwater, say for a week. That's the resiliency side of the park. The ability and materials we use for sidewalks and how easily they're cleaned, power washed, things like that. That's what we're referring to when we say resiliency. It's the remainder of the park outside of actual flood protection.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you for that, because I think it's important that folks understand that there still will be flooding in that area, that's not going to go away, that we're protecting the building and protecting the future docking area, but there will be flooding. I mean, we're on the riverfront, so let's make it clear that the expectations of the public understand that, and that's being accounted for in the plan. So thank you for that additional clarification.
Okay. Councilmember Graham?
Actually, I think the impetus of this plan probably began under Director Rogers back in 2013 when he inspired all of us with the Riverwalk that he engaged with when he was in San Antonio, Texas. But we should not be at 30,000 feet anymore, folks. We just shouldn't. We should be ready to land the plane. I understand the vagaries of not knowing precisely how much money we're going to have. And when we say anywhere between 16 million and 25 million, that gives me indigestion. Nevertheless, we should have some good idea by now, with all the engagement we've had with our stakeholders, what we want to see. And as the money comes in, ensure that all the elements are included. But let me get practical now. Manager, on the security aspect for this park. I think Councilman Euler may have touched a little bit on day-to-day operations, maintenance, et cetera. How's the security going to work?
Well, I think as Mr. Grebe mentioned, we're trying to build in some additional lighting within the space to make it more lit up in the evenings, and so that it's safer from that aspect. But ultimate security is still going to be the responsibility of our police department, as well as when we have events. The Park District does contract with our police department to be there as off-duty, special duty details that they'll do, and we'll continue those types of activities as it goes forward.
So it's going to be a combination of the Park District Police and our city police.
Correct. For events, when we have events and activities. The rest of the time, it's our police department's responsibility to supervise.
Police department at that point. I think it's a visionary plan. I think it's fantastic. I think it's going to move our city forward. And I think it's something that capitalizes on an asset that we've had for decades in our downtown. As more and more people are living downtown, that's called the beautiful Illinois River. We are not a corn-filled city. We are a great city by a great river. And we have not capitalized on that. This plan will actually do that. And so I would just say, as the weeks and months go past, and certainly as August 8 approaches quickly, we want to get that plane down to where it's close to a landing, understanding that we don't quite know how much money we're going to have yet, which is, I believe a lot of it's going to flow through DCEO, and I know our mayor's working on that. Thank you, Mayor.
Very welcome. Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, I would just like to commend the group for their diligence and their hard work, and I'm excited about the opportunity to have a beautiful riverfront once again. And I think, as was mentioned during your presentation, we anticipate that at some point we'll have another beautiful boat to dock there and to make use of again. So I think, as my colleague, Councilmember Graham, has said, we are the River City, and I believe the river is one of our best assets. And so I would just like to commend you on your hard work, and please let us know what we can do to support you. And I think Mayor has talked a lot about the smart streets concept. You talked about lighting. A project of this magnitude would also benefit well from cameras. We can't police and security guard our way 24 hours a day. So a project of this magnitude, I believe, would benefit very well from the technology we could use with the smart street lights as well as the cameras, Mayor.
Absolutely.
So that way we would have 24-hour, 7 days a week surveillance of our beautiful riverfront. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for your hard work.
Thank you.
Councilmember Vespa?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also want to commend you all for putting this together. I think it is very exciting. I think, when people cross 74 into our city and they see something like this, it impresses them. It'll impress a lot of people already here too. And it'll draw large crowds. I think that itself does a lot for security. I am a little confused about the interactive water feature. I didn't see anything in the slides about it, except that there would be one behind the Gateway building, but isn't there already one behind the Gateway building, or are we talking about that one that stopped working years ago?
So currently behind the Gateway building, the plan view, maybe. Right there. So currently, straight out from the Gateway building, there's a sunken fountain. It's not operable, older, not operable. What we're proposing in this concept or this idea is a flush surface one with pop jets that can shoot water up through. So it's interactive. Kids could run through it. Lighting has become an art feature of it. But it can also be turned off and just be deck space as well. So if you're having an event at the Gateway building and needed it for that, it would be an option. This would be a totally different type of fountain than what was there. A lot newer technology, a lot newer filtration system and safer, but not a pool that became problematic also.
Okay. Just one other question. Is this all going to be enclosed like a park and then, locked at night or something? Or is this just open space?
The plan I would see is it would have operating hours, close at dusk or time determined by the city, but it would not be fenced off and gated.
Okay.
I think, especially in an urban park, in a park like Peoria, to gate it off and close it off would be sending a wrong message also. So you want it to be open, want it to be for the people, for the public. And normal operating hours and signage that says when the park is open, when it's closed, is appropriate, and then through cameras, through policing, be maintained.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon Young?
I echo the sentiments of just about everybody regarding this is absolutely beautiful, the beautification of it all. I started thinking I started feeling. It was more than thinking, I felt. And you want to feel it when you see it, right? I felt hope and optimism. And I think most of us are scratching our heads when it comes to the crime in the city. And I was so pleased to see you all include the data associated, the research associated with green spaces reducing crime. It's true. And so I was glad to see that. I also was very pleased with the inclusion of neighboring residents in the artistry. You know, when you're invested in something, you're more likely to invest in something when you play a role in it. And so all of those moving parts that you all thought about, it really shows in the hard work, the effort, and what we can do as a city. I especially like that red sign of Peoria, and I can see myself taking some selfies there.
Thank you, thank you.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I join with my colleagues in being very appreciative of this plan. I just think it's got so many features that will be unique to our city. The River's Edge construction, that's, I suppose you've seen that before. I've never seen that before. That is just a wonderful idea. The fountain and the bell tower, the Peoria. I know that you said we could do anything, but sounds good to me. The big Peoria sign. The flexibility of the or the what am I trying to say? The downtown market. I think that rail system, I suppose that's used somewhere.
Yes, there's an example of it done in Cincinnati. They use it for a completely different purpose. So, hey, I'm not going to say we don't use a good idea, but it was done for a different purpose, a different way. But I think it's a very good application, harking to the history of Peoria.
I guess in some, I think it's a beautiful design, and going that far is good enough, but the unique features of it, the Peoria, Illinois features of it, I think are going to pay great dividends to our city, to the people who live here, work here, as well as people who are visiting. But this is mainly for people who are here, which is wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councilman. Just to add, we want to bring people down to the downtown area. We want to bring them from all over Peoria downtown. And part of this Sound and Art Center is to have sort of a static art revealing the art and the history of Peoria, whether the Whiskey City, whatever the case might be. Have local artists participate in this. So thank you.
Councilman Graham.
One follow-up. If it's 16 million or we have 25 million to spend, we're still envisioning that this riverfront park will span from the Michael down to the Murray. Is that correct?
For the time being, yes.
We're not going to compress it, depending on the money situation.
Well, depending on the money, we'll see what we get. But the actual limits are now from bridge to bridge.
Well, we're planning on doing it from bridge to bridge.
Yes.
If we have only 16 million, are we still going to do it from bridge to bridge?
I think that we can phase this. I think that that's one of the things that we'll have to come back to you with design elements that maybe we have to say this comes at a later date because this is what we want to do first. And those will be discussions that we want to vet with you as the council as we come forward with these items. I think that's the best approach that we can take is to say, if this is what we know that we have. And I think that there's going to have to be an element, as Mr. Grebe mentioned, of private fundraising that we're going to have to do. And I think there's interest. So we need to capitalize on that and probably, be more diligent about seeing what we can do to raise additional dollars in order to make sure that we've got the capital costs and maintenance costs covered.
So now raising private dollars, from whom?
From benefactors, whether that be individuals. When the riverfront, for example, was done in the 90s, there were private benefactors that gave money for different elements of the project. They raised additional funds that went into, for example, the clock tower and the space around the clock tower. We need to continue to acknowledge those people that donated for the Gateway building and that. So, we're going to continue to make sure that we have that documented and maintained and preserved, but we're going to have to do that again. It's similar to the process that was done in the 90s.
As long as we're not relying on them for maintenance.
No, exactly.
I'm very serious. The other thing is we have to consider we're going to get the Amtrak here, Mayor.
That's right.
So what thought process has gone into how this riverfront park would interact with the Amtrak connection?
So there's two elements and two locations that we've really been trying to zero in on for a potential Amtrak station. The first being the post office, which would be on the northern end, just outside of this area. The second being near the Gateway building, where we're possibly looking at what is currently Caterpillar's parking lot as a potential train station location that could tie into that. So I think this fits nicely with all of that, and it's something that we could do. That by our agreement with Caterpillar right now over the weekends and when we have events, that after hours, that parking lot we have the ability to use that space. So
some of the questions our constituents wanted me to ask, and the beautiful thing about this council is it's our downtown. Doesn't matter what district it officially resides in. Every one of us have constituents who have businesses downtown. Our downtown is a focal point of our civic pride. It's not the only focus for our civic pride, but we all want this to work, and I think we have, I don't think we're at 30,000 feet anymore. I think we know what we want. Granted, we may have to make some adjustments depending upon the money situation, but I don't think it's going to largely rule out the things that we think are essential. And Mayor, that's all I have to contribute tonight. Thank you.
Agree. Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question for you, Mr. Manager, as we head into budget season, and we will be deciding in the last 2 years of our American Rescue Plan funds allocation. Is there a way that we can allocate any of that funding towards this project specifically? I know one of the tranches is invested in water, sewer, or broadband projects. I mean, is there any way where you could foresee us maybe investing some of that funds to address some of the flooding concerns as an infrastructure project?
I think that there's the water and sewer. I think they mean drinking water and sanitary sewer. So I'm not sure that we could use a lot of that for that. Some of the open space, there may be an element of that we could look at with that. I think that we've also, as part of that budget, kind of already identified where we were looking at. I think we may have only $1 million or $2 million left to really allocate based upon some of the other funds like small business support and demolition work in the city that we've been using those funds for. So there's a little bit that I think that we'll have to program that's coming forward. I think that the FEMA funds, that the BRIC grant that comes forward, I think we're in a very good position on the flood protection to get additional federal dollars if we put together a good application. That we need to do that. So that's something that I think that we can certainly pursue from that perspective.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thinking other people's money. And, we also may consider federal earmark requests through our federal representatives. So everyone is interested in reimagining our downtown and reimagining our riverfront. it's a high priority because just like Councilman Graham said, the downtown, the riverfront, it's all of ours. It's not one district, right? It's all of ours. But gentlemen, Mr. Garib, Mr. Graham, you've exceeded my expectations with this marvelous plan. I also want to thank you, Director Powers and Mr. Manager and your teams for all the effort and work that you've put into this. It's been a very inclusive process, which is very important to us. And once we approve, this concept, it's going to be part of our strategic plan. We're going through a strategic planning process, and this becomes part of that plan. So we're going to continue to work very closely with our state representatives and our state department of DCEO to work to get that money released so that we can move forward with this project. So thank you very much. Oh, I've got one more. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to move to receive and file.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Greb? Okay, seconded by Councilmember Greb. No more discussion. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. Okay. 23-277 is a communication from the City Manager and Director of Community Development with a request to approve a resolution amending the East Village Growth Cell Tax Increment Financing Economic Development Advisory Committee Charter to update membership representation after the 2020 census redistricting and modify the schedule for regular meetings.
Mr. Manager, yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to actually turn the floor over to Director Doolin to outline this, and I think that Councilman Riggenbach will certainly have some comments as well.
Okay, Director?
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Mayor. I think I'm actually going to defer to Councilman Riggenbach, if that is okay, and he is going to handle it. Then I will take any questions about the specifics.
Councilman Riggenbach?
It's a roundabout way. Thank you, Madam Mayor. For us tonight is really very much a housekeeping item. After the 2020 census and the redrawing of the council maps, there needed to be some adjustments to the membership of the committee and the purpose, and a few of the details of the charter were updated to reflect the reality of what we've been doing the last 10 years. And with that comment of what we've been doing the last 10 years, I wanted to take this opportunity, if I may, just to bring all of my colleagues and the public up to speed on this, because this TIF, the East Village Grow Cell TIF, was formed right in the aftermath of the closing of Cub Foods, which was the Midtown, part of the Midtown TIF. So at that time, TIFs were kind of a naughty word, and the fact that the city was thinking about another TIF really raised a lot of eyebrows, particularly in the East Bluff neighborhood. So part of that process is we worked with OSF, because it was the TIF that helped facilitate the building of the Jump Trading Center, which I think we now consider an anchor in that part of town. But part of that was to establish this advisory group. So we've had this group of citizens meeting on a regular basis, and they will continue to meet going forward as well. We've just, like I say, done a little bit of housekeeping with the makeup of the actual committee. But let me point out some of the things that this TIF has accomplished for the East Bluff and the East Village in general, and that goes down the hill a little bit beyond Glen Oak. Probably one of my proudest moments was the Nebraska corridor, when OSF took the Cub Food and repurposed that into their wonderful facility there, along with Heartland Health. We really felt that it was necessary to make the East Bluff more welcoming, so we spent money improving the sidewalks along Nebraska. We repaved the street, and this year we have new lighting going in there as well. So it really will be a welcoming thing for the people that work there and visit that OSF facility, that they can come down Nebraska, take a quick left on Wisconsin, and get some of the best steak tacos in town at Mi Familia. So that Nebraska corridor, I think, was a very important part of that puzzle initially. That being said, Wisconsin Avenue itself is going to be rebuilt all the way from Forest Hill to Republic, right in front of Glen Oaks School, and that's something the council has been very committed to, and we appreciate your ongoing support for that. We were able to secure some additional funding from the state. Thank you, Leader Gordon Booth, for that. And that project is being engineered now, and hopefully we'll see construction and groundbreaking actually take place next year. So Wisconsin itself will be rebuilt, which will really dovetail with the Wisconsin Avenue business plan, which we put in place about 8 years ago. That corridor, again, from Republic up to McClure, we put new pedestrian scale lighting and the ornamental lighting there. There were some new bus shelters put in by CityLink. And we've been very focused on our efforts to recruit new businesses there. Obviously, with the Kroger closing, that was kind of a kick in the gut, if you will. But Heartland Health has done an amazing job with that facility, and that area has never looked better. So if you haven't been over there lately, I would encourage you to check that out. And as our police chief announced a couple months ago, when we have the co-responder model coming into play, they're going to be using that facility also as a police substation, if you will. That's probably not the right word, Chief, but there will be a stronger police presence there as well. So that'll also add to the security in that area and let people know the commitment the city's making is ongoing. Let me just point out a few of the commercial developments that have taken place. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our long ago Community Development Director Pat Landis and Ross Black for their leadership in getting this formed, because as we were planning the boundaries of this TIF, it was decided that we want to include the west side of Knoxville, the second district, as we all are aware. And that has been a tremendous boon to the TIF itself, because the McDonald's was reconstructed, the Burger King was built new, the two car washes, ironically, have come into that area. Starbucks, Popeyes was also remodeled. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the OSF developments on that site with the Jump Trading Center and now the Cancer Treatment Center, those are just unfathomable, the commitment that OSF is putting right here in the heart of the East Bluff area. So commercial development and things like that are what people expect from a TIF, but the thing that makes this TIF unique, and the part that I think this council can be most proud of, is the residential component that we put in place. The East Village Grow-Sell housing program, in the years, and Director Doolin and I had a little talk about the council communication, because the numbers here go back to 2018. The program actually started in 2016. So going back to 2016, we have helped over 100 homeowners in the East Bluff make improvements to their homes. And that dollar amount is over $500,000. Wow. So I think that's something that shows our commitment to home ownership. It shows our commitment to the heritage neighborhoods, and it's something that's ongoing. This year, or last year in 2022, the TIF generated about $450,000. So when people stop you on the street and say, oh, another TIF, well, just know that when they're done right, they are an incredible tool. one last comment, and then I'll move for approval, I promise. But the residential new construction has also been something that I think we can all be proud of as well. The city, through LISC, was awarded a grant from the Attorney General's office that generated 8 new owner-occupied homes in the East Bluff, there were 8 new homes built by Habitat during this time, 8 new duplexes from that Attorney General grant, which are for supportive housing for residents with disabilities, and then there were 6 new houses built on Barrens as part of that Attorney General grant, and those are owner-occupied houses. And then we all know about Peoria Opportunities and their affordable rental houses, which produced 30 new construction homes for residents in the East Bluff, for the city of Peoria, let's be honest. So there's been a lot of good momentum going here. There's still work to be done, clearly, but I think as we move forward, we want to remind ourselves of the progress and the commitment that we've made, and we want to remind our constituents that just like with this riverfront plan, it took 5 years of planning to get to this point. Sometimes the change doesn't happen as quick as we want, but we have the commitment that we're going to continue working for that change.
Great.
And with that, I would move for the approval of the item before us.
Seconded by Councilmember Graham. Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach, for taking your time and identifying all those amazing outcomes, because they are amazing outcomes. And this has been, I would say, a model TIF program that hopefully can be replicated in other areas. But those are some amazing results, and we should all be very proud. So thank you for your leadership there. Thank you to staff. Do you, Director Doolin, have anything to add?
No. I think that, former Director Black gets a lot of credit for working with this. A lot of staff members that are no longer employed by the city of Peoria because they moved on to other things were a part of this plan, putting it together, their hard work, and then our existing staff that continues to implement this. I think, as Councilman Riggenbach highlighted, one of the best components of this is not only you have some commercial development, some nonprofit development, but also a lot of affordable housing development. Yeah. And traditionally with TIFs, affordable housing isn't something you always look at because sometimes those entities don't pay property taxes. But I think a good mix of all that has ensured that we have more affordable housing than we've had previously in the East Bluff. And really tried to encourage others to kind of step up. So just a really good mix of everything, really appreciative of staff's work on all this.
There's a lot going on there. Councilman?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And Director Doolin, forgive me for not acknowledging the work of your department. From, like we mentioned, Director Black, but you and Assistant Director Allison have just been incredible support for this. Carrie Lynn Wick is working specifically with 3rd District issues. Abby Youngblood. The list of our staff is incredible, and I just want to give them a shout out as well. So thank you.
And I'll also share with my friend Pat Landis your comments. She'll appreciate that from Texas, I believe. Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
23-278 is a communication from the City Manager, Chief of Police, and Finance Director Comptroller with a request for the following. A, approve a contract with Bob Lindsay Honda of Peoria for the purchase of 2 SUVs in an amount not to exceed $60,510. And B, approve a resolution to waive the bidding requirements for an additional 7 SUVs for an amount not to exceed $255,490. And this item B requires 2/3 vote of the council members voting, no less than 6 votes.
Thank
And
you.
we need
Mr. Manager?
Motions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to turn the floor over to Finance Director Kyle Craddy to walk through this item and explain the reason that we're asking for the waiver.
Yeah, absolutely. The item in front of you tonight is related to the ICEJA funding that the police department was able to get through the state. We came to you in May requesting the budget amendment for this item, and included in that was the 9 SUVs for the co-response model. We went out to bid in early June. The only responsive bid that we got was from Bob Lindsay for the 2 SUVs. So we reached out to a lot of the different dealerships in the area to ask why. And what we are finding is that they are unable to commit to having 9 SUVs in stock for these in the time frame that we need them to get this program up and running. So the request in front of you tonight is to approve the 2 that Bob Lindsay did give us a bid on, but then also give staff the ability to go out into the open market and procure these vehicles. We have done our due diligence. These type of vehicles, they are not your traditional police cruiser. So these are more compact SUVs. These do not fall under the state contract that we use a lot for our vehicles. They do not fall in any joint purchase arena. So we have gone through those options. And the city code requires that city council would waive the bidding requirements under certain circumstances by this 2/3 vote. So that is the request this evening, is to give staff the authority to go out in the open market and procure the additional 7 vehicles for an amount not to exceed that $255,490, which, coupled with the original request from Bob Lindsay, is the $315,000, which was the original part of the budget amendment that was passed in May. And I'm available if you have any questions.
Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director Craddy, it's not that you're too modest, but could you go into a little bit further the reason that it was difficult for dealers to deal with our request?
Yeah, it is really twofold. It is that their inability to be able to have that stock and get that stock in the time that we need it. It is also one of the issues we would run into is they would have it on their lot ready for us to buy through a bid, but because they're able to sell it by the amount of time it takes us to actually get back to council for approval, they would sell the vehicle out from underneath our original request, which I understand in this environment. And that is where the struggle point for us is when we go to a dealership and say, we want this, but it's going to be 3 weeks to a month. They're not that interested in wanting to sell to us on this.
Thank you. I think that makes it clearer. Madam Mayor, I would move to approve item A.
Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilwoman Gordon Young. Any questions, comments? Council Hayes?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is there 10 members in the chamber tonight? This will take 7 votes to approve. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. If there's no more questions, please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Councilman Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move to approve item B.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Any comments or questions? Please cast your ballots. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business?
Only in regard to strategic planning, council is scheduled to meet with our consultant on August the 9th I think from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And I think we've heard from almost everybody. I think we've got one that might be out of town on that date. But we wanted to have a backup plan in the event that we were not able to get everything done in that one day, that we would hopefully take the day after, which is August the 10th, and have 4 hours or up to 4 hours that evening, which would mean 4 o'clock p.m. to 8 o'clock p.m. that evening. So that's the request. Hopefully we can get a majority of the council to be able to accommodate that. Again, if we got everything done on the 10th, we wouldn't have to have the meeting. I mean, on the 9th, we wouldn't have to have the meeting on the 10th, but that is the request. So, okay.
We are at new business.
Is there any new business? Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. School season is upon us, as most school students who definitely attend Peoria Public Schools, they do return next week with the new schedule. The school year snuck up on us, but there are two school supply drives happening this week. The first one is Thursday. It is the Fill the Fire Truck Back to School Bash in collaboration with the Peoria Fire Department Local 50 and the Afro-American Fighter Fire Association, and along with the Peoria Park District. This event will take place at Treewind Park from 4:30 to 7 p.m. So people can arrive and they're able to get school supplies and backpacks in time for school for next week. And then there is another school supply drive, looks like this Saturday at the Dream Center. Their annual Backpack Peoria event is this Saturday, the 29th, from 9 a.m. to noon. So get out there and make sure that our students, they have the tools and resources they need to be successful this upcoming year. And I do want to shout out Antoine Banks, CEO of Product of the Projects. He had his back to school drive last Saturday. And I mean, he had 1,000 people over there on the hill off Armstrong Street for his event. So a lot of great community events, making sure that our students have what they need to be successful. Please, if you have already attended one drive, do not double up. Let's spread the wealth because the need is great, and we want to make sure that everyone has what they need to be successful. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman Allen. Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would just like to commend the Public Works Department. If Cy Maroon is in the back, is he back in the back, Director Powers, or in the overflow room? Could he, is he around? Okay, well, Director Powers, I don't know if you are privy to some of the work that's been going on, but I think sometime last fall we had been talking a lot about, matter of fact, let me back up. A couple of years ago we were talking about the issues with illegal dumping and tires, and I just wanted to commend the Public Works Department that has been collaborating with Ameren, Illinois to clear a lot of the brush and install lighting throughout alleys in and around parts of the South Side. And I think the hard work is paying off because as the students have been going around this summer doing litter patrol, I'm happy to say I have not seen the problem we've noticed in previous years with tires. And you know, there were several instances in the past where we run across 25 in an alley here. That's not to say they're not someplace in a boarded up house, but they have not been visible in and around places where we have always seen them in the past. So I just would like to commend you all on the hard work that you've been doing in terms of trying to get the alleys lit and clearing a lot of those spaces where people had been dumping tires in the past. So thank you, Director Powers and City Manager and Cy Maroon for all of your hard work. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome.
Actually, I would take that a step further, Counselor. Actually, Sean Johnson has been leading that effort specifically within operations with Ameren and the planned lighting and how it was going through the zones and the hot spots that we had. And please don't say that T word a third time because they'll show up. It's like Beetlejuice. But agreed, we've been seeing less, but still have plenty of them out there. So appreciate your kind words.
Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
Okay, I've got 5 cards. The first is Reverend Gianni Fogliano.
Good evening, City Council, Madam Mayor. My name is Reverend Gianni Fogliano. I am here to talk to you today about downtown parking. I was so excited to hear about the developments that are potentially coming to our riverfront and for the new business that's going in on Main Street. We've been having a problem lately in the evenings around parking around that new business, specifically also around Diesel, which is a community center for the LGBT community here in Peoria. I've had a conversation with the minister, my colleague at First United Methodist Church, about the parking situation in front of Diesel. They have had a long-standing agreement with Diesel that Diesel staff would clean the parking lot after They close in the evenings to allow parking spaces for their customers. It has become an issue during the summer that the city police department is telling the church that they have to close the parking, making our customers, not our customers, but members of our community who attend events at Diesel have to park in the back, in the Civic Center parking, which requires walking off into a side street. It's not as safe. People don't feel comfortable not being able to leave the business and go to a parking space that's in visible distance. I understand that this change from the police department is in part to combat the tailgating that was happening last summer, which is fair, but I have parked in spots that are 2 blocks away that still have tailgating that aren't being forced to be closed. So I'm really here to ask that we take into consideration the safety of our community, that we need to be able to park somewhere that we can be watched as we're walking safely to our parking space, and allow the church to re-enter that agreement with Diesel to allow parking. If we don't do this, it is hurting the business to not have parking. I recall during the conversation about putting in the reverse angle parking in downtown, Councilman Graham being very adamant about the importance of having accessible parking to our businesses in downtown, and to restrict parking is to restrict business in downtown. Not allowing people to park is not going to, it may eliminate crime, but if you don't allow people to park, you also eliminate business. So I ask you to consider reversing this policy and allow for parking. Use the laws that already exist to monitor alcohol consumption out in public spaces. That's not allowed. That shouldn't be allowed to begin with. But to restrict parking from customers that aren't engaged in that activity is punishing people that don't need to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Tom Hafel. Tom Heifel. Ray Lees. Mr. Lees.
Greetings. Just wanted to share my support, or share the support of the Downtown Advisory Commission. We asked for a special meeting of the planning team, and they were kind enough and gracious enough to meet with us, and we had a chance to review it. There are a number of us, as Kevin well knows, and Director Powers, there's a number of us that were in this from the beginning, and there were many iterations and gnashing of teeth and whatnot that happened relative to parking and green space and all of that, and I think that and I should also mention Sharon Graham in the Riverfront Market and her working with the planning team as well. So there's a lot that we go down there and they look at and think that there's a lot of space down there, but when you start to actually look at all the components that we want to put on the Riverfront Market and have them work effectively for our community and for the residents, I think it becomes a challenge, and I think we've gotten to a point, even at 30,000 feet, I think the plane is still flying, and we'll see if we can land it. Obviously, the devil's in the details, and particularly budgets and things like that. So just wanted to, again, express the Downtown Advisory Committee's support for the plan as it is presented now. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Lees. Jonathan Vota.
Hello again. You may remember me from last week. I wanted to comment on the Riverfront redevelopment plan. I like a lot of things. I love the band shell. I love the dog park, the sports amenities. There's a lot of very amazing additions to that space, but I do have some criticisms. And you may be able to guess if you remember what I said last week about what I'm going to comment on. Where's the bike parking? I don't think I saw a single. There wasn't a mention of it. I don't think I saw anything in that presentation that looked like you'd park a bike at it. You're telling me they went to cities like all over that are similar river cities making improvements in their space, and they didn't think to add bike parking? I mean, I'm sorry. I don't mean to sound like sarcastic or not snippy or rude, but this is kind of silly. If you look at the picture of the overhead view, the whole thing, it's like 50% gray. And I do adamantly believe that like green spaces are extremely valuable, and I believe that, but I don't need to believe it because there's research behind the fact that is impeccably valuable to a city and to its people. And I mean, you've got the opportunity to make drastic improvements, and like 50% of it is gray, is parking lot. I know you need some of it, but I know parking is obviously a big issue in a lot of ways in the city, but there's very, very little space on the riverfront, and you want half of it to be for cars, and they're calling it flexible space. I mean, is the parking lot right outside this building called flexible space? If it's flexible, it's in spite of the fact that it's a parking lot. So I frankly, it's just kind of really disappointing. Please, I'm begging you to make biking and other forms of transit a priority, because if you do, you will not need as much parking space, and people don't want to travel to a parking lot. Parking makes a space readily accessible but it becomes a space that people no longer want to go to. So I am adamantly against surface parking. I'm adamantly against adding a lot of surface parking. I get that it already is mostly parking. What they said, they'd add 10 more spaces. But yeah, you have an opportunity to make dramatic improvements, not marginal ones. So insofar as this is still in the planning phase, please prioritize at least a bike rack, like one. Okay, I'll stop complaining now. It is a very exciting plan, so I don't want to sound like I'm just dogging on it. If we had this tomorrow, I would be so stoked to go play volleyball or whatever it is. It looks very, very cool. Thank you for that. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Mr. Voda. Last we have Katie Van Cleve. Ms. Van Cleve.
Hello. I'm here to talk about the riverfront plan as well, and I was super interested to hear about it. I've been watching it a little bit from afar, 30,000 feet, maybe you might say. And I'm really interested specifically in the accessibility or usability of the space. And I know that we're still at 30,000 feet, but there's a lot of things I can see there, and that's that we are not really thinking beyond minimum requirements. And I want to make sure that we understand that, I have a lot of respect for architects and engineers, and this is an amazing plan. It's fantastic. But the thing about the ADA, it is a minimum requirement. It is a barely passing grade. And we owe it to ourselves, the 15 to 25 million we're going to put into this plan, and future generations to make sure that we are doing more than barely passing in this plan. So I urge you to make sure that universal design is a foundation of not just the 30,000 feet conceptual plan, but every piece of this plan. I was really struck by something that Councilman Riggenbach said. He referred to this as our front yard. If our citizens with disabilities cannot get into the front yard, where else will they go in this city? And we need to think long and hard about that when we're looking at this design, and it needs to not be an afterthought. Every piece of this design should consider, I think Madam Mayor said, all of us. It should consider all of us, including our citizens with disabilities. Thank you.
You're welcome. Madam Clerk?
We are at executive session.
Okay, I would like to invite a motion to adjourn and to convene in closed session immediately following adjournment of the City Council meeting pursuant to the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120/2C11 to discuss pending litigation and pursuant to the Open Meetings Act 5 ILCS 120/2C21 for approval by the body of closed session minutes. Please cast your ballots. Oh, yeah, moved by Councilmember Euler, seconded by Councilmember Allen. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Graham. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your service.